Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 5th of November of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Zaporizhzhia direction. For the previous few days we were talking mainly a lot about 128th Mountain Assault Brigade, this very important, very powerful brigade in Ukrainian defense and offensive operations. This brigade used to operate and attack the Russian positions in Petykhatki and Zherebyanki during the summer Ukrainian counter-offensive operation, but due to the significant losses, the Ukrainians took a decision to redeploy this brigade in the near rear for regrouping. And yesterday we got a very interesting update, and the sources were saying that the Russians managed to discover the concentration of forces of that 128th Brigade, and as a result of strikes, significant number of Ukrainian forces, Ukrainian soldiers, and mainly officers and mainly artillery officers of that brigade were killed or destroyed in the city by the name of Zaporizhzhia. On this video we can see the concentration of Ukrainian soldiers, officers. They were planning to have some barbecue, they were planning to drink a lot of vodka, they were planning to eat some meat, but the Russians managed to discover their positions, and as a result of Iskander strike, the Ukrainians lost up to 30 officers and soldiers, and around 50 were wounded, and there were very heavy wounded soldiers, obviously. After that strike, there were a lot of talks, a lot of rumors. What did happen? How did that happen? Even Zelenskyy noted the situation that there is currently criminal, that this is a crime, and that now the Ukrainians start investigation process trying to understand whose fault was that. But first version was that the Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian concentration of forces as a result of they managed to see significant number of cell phones in one area. Maybe those cell phones that recently was discovered or spotted somewhere along the front line. So first they were somewhere in Zherebyanki, and after that they managed to see all this concentration of those cell phones in the city. So that's where they attack. Other sources are saying that there was a traitor among the officers of 128th Brigade, and the sources are saying that that was the deputy commander of brigade, and he had connections in the past with LPR, and he sold the cigarettes from LPR on the territory of Ukraine. He was captured by the Ukrainian let's say SBU forces, anti-corruption forces, and that was the way how he tried to escape and not to be captured or got in jail, something like this. Anyway, the situation is critical for the Ukrainians, and it's very difficult to understand how exactly this could happen on the combat line, very close to the combat line. And furthermore, other sources are saying that in the very near future the Ukrainians were planning to redeploy 128th Brigade, which was some kind of rest after the clashes in June-July for Zherebyanki, in direction of Rabotino, to reinforce the Ukrainian forces in this area and to stop the Russian movements and the Russian progress, or maybe even to start Ukrainian another wave, another stage of counter-offensive operation in direction of Novoverbova, Novomikhailivka, Novoprokopovka, Kopany. But the thing is that now I'm not sure that Ukrainians are going to do this, or they will do this, but as we discussed, the top officer level of that brigade was destroyed as a result of Iskander strike. As a result, the Ukrainians lost up to 30 officers and soldiers, and around 50 were wounded. Now let's talk about Bradley Square. The Russians reported that as a result of clashes on the Bradley Square, the Ukrainians lost 45 soldiers, 11 armored vehicles, including 2 tanks. And as you can see, according to this map, there are a lot of geolocations in most of them, and 100% of these geolocations were received from the Russian sources, which means that Ukrainians haven't published nothing from this area, haven't published anything from this area. And this configuration of all these geolocations can tell us few things. First of all, maybe the Ukrainians did really plan to start offensive operation, and they were planning to redeploy fresh brigades to restart more waves in direction of Tokmak, and the Ukrainians took a decision to make some operational operational pause, or at least silent pause, let's say, to collect as much as possible rounds, and after that to use their mighty and their power. Another option is that the Russians are planning to counterattack, because we see the Russian focus, and this is something like a Russian pattern. Every time the Russian concentrate and start concentrating fire, that means that the Russians are planning to start offensive operation. For example, even on this video, we see how the Russian tank left its original position, moved on the combat line, and start bombing and attacking the Ukrainian forces on the base of Verbova, like Bradley Square. Other updates are coming that the Russians managed to establish control over the trenches on the west of Verbova. This video was published by the 82nd Air Assault Brigade, which confirms that the Russians do have control over these territories, and that the Ukrainians, as a result of Russian pressure, were forced to step back further in direction of the fields. And we have a lot of updates, a lot of geolocations of FPV drone strikes and so on. So the situation is critical for the Ukrainians, and there are very high chances that before winter comes, the Ukrainians will be forced to step back from this foothold. Now we are moving to the south Donetsk direction. We got also a lot of details, a lot of updates from this territory. The Russians, for the third time in a row, attacked the bridge on the north, on the top of Konstantinovka, and as a result of that strike, the bridge was completely damaged and destroyed. As you can see, according to two explosions, as I understand, the Russians were using FAB 500 for those purposes. And in the next scene, we're gonna see that one of the line of the bridge was destroyed and broken. You see that just one line left, but I'm not sure. And this author of this video claims that currently the Ukrainians are no longer able to use this bridge for heavy equipment and heavy tanks. So this supply road was cut, and now the Ukrainians have more logistic problems, but still they have forces and power to control this territory. And if you remember, a few days in a row we were talking about the battle in the vicinity of Mykolaiv, and we got mainly we received just updates from the Ukrainian side, and today we got another update from the Ukrainian side with more details. On this video we see like the Russian attack, more episodes of the Russian attack, and according to the author of this video, this attack took place on the 4th of November, but as I understand, this is like all the scenes, and the Ukrainians try to show the old scene but with the new pictures as the battle of 4th of November, but basically all those clashes took place on the 1st of November. But the Ukrainians tried to hide the Russian progress, but anyway, they wanted to show some, let's say, beautiful pictures, very big explosions. For example, in this video we see another destroyed Russian tank, but the thing is that this tank was destroyed on Ukrainian positions. So let's one more time. These are trenches, this explosion was geolocated, and this event took place here. So anyway, no matter the heavy losses, no matter the Russian progress and Russian problems in this area, as a result of offensive operation, the Russians managed to enter the tree line, and currently the Russians are trying to clear this territory, and they continue their offensive operation. And the main purpose, as we discussed in this operation, is to reach this line and to capture these three lines that are currently under Ukraine control. And if the Russians can do this, of course, this will bring more problems for the Ukrainians, and this will allow the Russians to even to encircle a little bit the Ukrainians that located in Vuhledar, at least from the east. So we'll see what is going to be next, but the progress probably is very good, no matter the losses that the Russians had. Now we're moving to the Avdiivka direction, to Donetsk area. We got a lot of geolocations, and mainly the geolocations were coming from the northern part of this area. Some Russian sources are saying that as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to break through the railways and to get closer to Stepovo for another 500 meters. There were no updates whether the Russians managed to enter the village or establish control over the first buildings, but the Russians are moving along the true lines in this direction. We have 100% geolocations, confirmations that the Russians managed to enter the railways. On this video, for example, we can see how the Ukrainian FPV drones were bombing and attacking the Russian forces in this area, which confirms the Russian progress. We don't see whether the Russians managed to cross the railways, but at least the Russians managed to get here. It's 100% sure information. Also, we have the video how the Russian destroyed the Leopard and damaged the Leopard that Ukrainians abandoned in this area. According to the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, as a result of clashes in the Donetsk direction, the Ukrainians during the previous 24 hours lost 235 soldiers and 8 armored vehicles. So the level of loss of the Ukrainians is not so big, but it's the biggest level of losses on the entire combat line from Kherson to Kupiansk. So there are very heavy clashes, obviously. Now we're moving to Bakhmut Artyomovsk direction, and we have a lot of updates as well from this direction. The Russians are trying to restore control over the railways that goes from let's add them on map, that goes from Azaryanovka, Zelenopolye, Kurdyumovka to Andreevka. And there are very heavy clashes. The Russians are storming this area from the north, and the Russians are trying to storm and clear this area from the south. From the south, the Russians are using mainly FPV drones to bomb Ukrainians with different types of grenades, and maybe they're very successful with this, but there are still lots of Ukrainians. And on the north, there was a very heavy clashes that previous night between the reconnaissance and sabotage group of Russian forces and Ukrainians. And as a result of those clashes, the Russians managed to win that short battle. But yet, the Ukrainians control Andreevka. So we'll see what is going to be next. On the north, we had updates from the Ukrainian side. The Ukrainians using FPV drones were bombing and attacking the Russian forces in this area. As you can see, this is drone Baba Yaga. And so this video confirms that the Russians have their positions in this area, and that this territory, at least small part on the side of Klishchiivka, still under Russian control. This is the situation on the south of Bakhmut Artyomovsk. When talking about northern direction, we also got updates that the Russians continue their offensive operation on the south of Berkhovka water reservoir. The Russians are trying to advance along the railways in direction of Bogdanovka, but for now no geolocations, and the Russians are moving in direction of Khromovo, and there are very heavy clashes along this small gray zone. So the Russians are trying to maintain the gray zone between Ukrainian and Russian positions, and they're trying to get as close as possible to the Ukrainian forces in this area, and probably, of course, to establish control over Khromovo and maybe to begin the battle for Bogdanovka. The question is, what is the difference in current situation with the situation that was in this area, let's say months or 2 months or 3 months ago, why the Russians now are able to achieve some progress, and why the Russians haven't managed to make any progress, why haven't the Russians managed to make any progress in the past. And the thing is that, as we discussed in the previous videos, the Ukrainians, due to the critical situation on the Kupiansk front line, were forced to redirect their forces of 54th and 57th Brigade from Bakhmut direction. And this 57th Brigade was in pair together with 77th Air Mobile Brigade were responsible exactly for this area. And now there is like a real gap, real defense holes, and the Ukrainians, due to this critical situation, don't have enough of manpower to stop the Russians. And all these attacks in this gray zone from the Russian side is just reconnaissance in force and reconnaissance in combat, to understand whether the Ukrainians are able to hold this bridgehead, or if the Russians will increase the pressure, they will collapse and they will be forced to step back. So this is the situation on the north of Bakhmut direction. Other interesting updates are coming from Spirne, and today we got, let's say, another confirmation that the Russians managed to enter the village, and currently they are clearing this territory, and that Spirne is currently under Russian control. This is the only video we have from some building that the Russian soldiers were moving from village, were walking in the village and making the video. And if we take a look at Spirne for today, we're gonna see at least 2 geolocations. On this video we see how the Russian FPV drones were bombing the Ukrainian infantry on the southern fortification area, and we also got the video how the Russians were bombing the northern Spirne fortification area with artillery bombardments. And but these updates are not the only updates from this territory, let's say, for the previous week, obviously. And even if we increase the number of updates, let's say from the 22nd of October, we're gonna see a significant number of updates. And if we increase, of course, number of updates from the 1st of October, it will give us the real picture. We're gonna see like that the Russians were working in this area hardly, and they were trying to penetrate and to destroy some Ukrainian defense belts. And if we take a look at this concentration of Russian fire, we see that the main Ukrainian fortification was located on the south western part of Spirne. The second fortification area was in the central part of Spirne, and the final fortification area was along this forest on the north. And the Russians, as you can see, were bombing every single one, trying to penetrate the Ukrainians' defense belt. And furthermore, we got the video of the 25th of October, how the Russians were trying, that was the first attempt to storm Spirne with tanks, with armored vehicles, but the Russians haven't lost anything in that battle. They moved and got very close to the village, but then they turned and turned back. So that was something like reconnaissance in force. And that attack took place on the 25th, so almost 2 weeks ago. And today the Russians are saying that as a result of 2 weeks clashes, the Russians managed to enter and capture this territory. So as I understand, the Russians were moving in 3 directions. That was the first direction, the Russians' movement. That was the second direction, the central part. And of course, the Russians were moving on the north, the third direction. So we need to wait more. We need to get more details. But maybe this village has fallen, and then the Ukrainians has more problems. And one more time, why did it happen? Why did the Ukrainians lose the battle for Spirne, if they lose, of course? And the main question and the main answer to this question is that this area used to be under protection, under responsibilities of 54th Mechanized Brigade, that Ukrainians, due to the very critical, very bad situation, were forced to redeploy in Kupinsk direction to slow down and stop the Russians in Ivanovka, Orlyanka, Yagidne area. And this very experienced brigade that been located in the area of Spirne since the creation of this front line. They knew this territory, they knew this ground, they knew every single fortification, so they felt themselves pretty safe. And then the Ukrainians took a decision to replace them with the 4th Rapid Response Brigades, National Guard. That this brigade is not familiar with the terrain, with this place, and that was the reason. Well, this is the reason why the Russians are so successful. So we need more updates about this territory to update the map, because for now we'll keep as this. But if we continue receiving updates of this type, we'll update this territory on the Russian color. When talking about Kupiansk and Lyman front lines, there are no changes. The level of losses is minimal. The Russians also published the video how they managed to discover another command center of Ukrainian forces in the east village Tarskoye, and as a result of artillery strike, or as a result of Tornado S strike, that command center was destroyed. We don't have the numbers of Ukrainian losses, but probably the Ukrainians lost significant number of, not like hundreds, of course, maybe a few dozens, but anyway, this is also very important. Every single soldier currently is very important in this on this phase of special operation. When talking about Kupiansk direction, there are no changes, just few updates about the Russian bombardments of Petropavlovka. The Russians are continue moving in this direction, and the battle for Ivanovka that we have already discussed in the previous videos. The situation on the ground, we understand, we see the situation clear, we understand what is going to be next, we see that the Ukrainians have problems, we see that the Russians are pushing, and maybe soon they're going to penetrate the entire, not just one defense belt. The only thing that we don't understand, at least I don't understand, is Zelenskyy. And today he surprised me even more. He talk a lot, and today, for example, he made something like ultimatum to the United States Congress, saying that if the states are not going to provide the Ukrainians the military aid, then the United States of America need to get ready for the real war with the Russians, something like this. And also today he noted and reported that the Ukraine is planning to change the plans and strategical approach of this war with the Russians. It's very difficult to understand what he was talking about, but obviously not about the changing of T-72 for to T-64 or something like this. He was talking about something big, something very big. And when the final things about Kherson direction, obviously, the clashes in the vicinity of Krynki continues. We have some fire anomalies. The Russians are trying to bomb and destroy this area without any progress for now. And the Russian sources also are saying that the Ukrainians managed to concentrate in Krynki up to 300 soldiers. So now, for now, on the 5th of November, there is a battalion in Krynki. And this is a very big power, very big forces, and the Russians don't have possibility currently to force the Ukrainians to step back, and the Ukrainians are sending more and more forces, and they're almost concentrated and collected the critical mass for further offensive operation. The only thing that the Russians can do is to bomb Kazatsk, Berislav with FABs, with missiles, trying to slow down this process of creation of critical mass. But as I understand, it helps, of course, but not for 100%. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel. Put your likes to my Patreon. And have a good day. Bye bye.